You don't have to be a military strategist to know that an army isn't just its weapons. It's a body. Every body needs a brain. The missiles and the radar dishes. The fighter jets. Those are just the hands and the fists. They can only do what they're told. The real power is in the room where the orders begin. That's where a commander picks up a phone and decides who lives, who dies, and what gets launched next. That room is gone. For 8 days, the pattern was predictable. American strikes hit the coastline. They took out fast attack boats. They damaged radar stations watching the Strait of Hormuz. It was steady. It was limited. Then, on the night of July 15, the pattern shattered. The target list changed. Command centers replaced coastal radar. Missile storage sites replaced patrol boats. The buildings where Iranian generals planned their next move became the priority. This was no longer about equipment sitting on a coastline. This was about the machinery that runs the war itself. What makes this moment different is not the number of explosions. It is the type of target. Command centers matter for a simple reason. They are where the decisions happen. When Iran wants to fire a missile at a neighboring country, the order starts there. When a U.S. aircraft enters Iranian airspace, the alert reaches that room first. Destroy the room, and the whole system slows down. Even if every missile and every soldier is still in place, they cannot be directed. Footage from Tehran that night showed one of the largest explosions recorded since the conflict began. By 4 in the morning, more explosions followed. This time, the strikes were not limited to the south of the country. They reached the capital itself. The scale of the operation also expanded. Reports pointed to involvement from F-35 and F-18 fighters, along with F-15E strike aircraft. Analysts also raised the possibility of a bone bomber in the mix, based on the size of the blasts and the height of the resulting smoke. Here is why that detail matters. The bone can carry a heavy load of long-range missiles launched from outside Iranian airspace. The aircraft itself never has to enter the danger zone. A missile can be launched from hundreds of miles away, guide itself to the target, and strike before anyone on the ground knows an aircraft was even involved. This changes the entire risk calculation. The United States no longer needs to fly directly over Tehran to strike its command structure. The missile does the work. The aircraft returns to base. Alongside the buildings, air defense systems inside the capital were also hit. State-linked media in Iran confirmed the activation of air defenses in both the eastern and western districts of Tehran, a sign that the capital itself was now under direct threat, not just its outer defenses. What makes this moment distinct is the type of target. For 8 days, Iran lost equipment. On this night, it began losing the ability to organize what remains. A missile depot can be replaced over time. A destroyed command center cannot issue an order until it is rebuilt, staffed, and reconnected to the rest of the military. This is the foundation of everything that follows. While explosions were still lighting up the sky over Tehran, Iran's leadership was already choosing its words carefully. Officials repeated a familiar warning. The Strait of Hormuz would stay closed until the United States agreed to Iran's terms for the waterway. They called it a red line. They said it would never move. But this was not the only message coming out of Tehran that day. Iran's military spokesman added something new. He said a large part of Iran's military capability had not yet been used. If the strikes continued, the response would go beyond the enemy's expectations. A warning meant to sound powerful. Yet it came only hours after reports suggested that a significant portion of Iran's ballistic missile storage had already been destroyed in the earlier strikes. At the same time, Iran's most senior IRGC commander made his own statement. Enemies would carry their wish for Iran's surrender to the grave. Strong language. Language meant to show resolve. But strong language is often what a government reaches for when its options start narrowing. Then came a move that did not match the tone of everything else. Iran released Dina Kari, an American citizen who had been wrongfully detained. Officials described it as a gesture of goodwill. Here is where the story becomes genuinely interesting. In the same 20-4-hour period, Iran was threatening to open new fronts in the conflict, refusing to negotiate over the Strait of Hormuz, and firing missiles toward neighboring countries. Yet it also freed an American prisoner, an act typically meant to open the door to talks, not close it. This is not confusion. It is strategy, but a strategy under visible strain. Iran appears to be running two tracks at once. One track uses military threats and proxy attacks to apply pressure and preserve the appearance of strength. The other track uses small diplomatic gestures, like a prisoner release, to keep a possible negotiation channel alive through intermediaries such as Oman. Governments running dual tracks like this depend on one thing above all: control. They need to calibrate exactly how much pressure to apply and exactly when to ease off, so the military track does not overwhelm the diplomatic one. That kind of calibration requires clear, functioning command centers. The same command centers that were just struck the night before. This is why Iran's public statements, read carefully, do not sound like a government executing a plan. They sound like a government trying to hold two opposing messages together while the infrastructure needed to manage that balance is actively being dismantled. The threats may still be real. The missiles may still be there. But a threat only carries weight if the system behind it can act on it in a coordinated way. That is precisely the question Iran's leadership now faces. Whether the machinery required to back up its own words is still standing behind them. To understand why this stage of the conflict feels different, it helps to look past the explosions and examine how the strikes are actually being carried out. The method matters just as much as the target. Modern American air power does not always require a jet to fly directly over its target. One weapon central to this campaign is a long-range stand-off missile capable of traveling more than 500 nautical miles before it reaches its destination. An aircraft can release the weapon while still far outside Iranian air defenses, then turn away while the missile continues on its own toward the target. By the time the strike lands, the aircraft that launched it may already be far from danger. In earlier decades, striking a target deep inside Iran would have meant sending pilots directly into contested airspace, past radar systems and air defense batteries. Now, a bomber can release its weapons from a safe distance. The missile itself becomes the only thing that has to survive the journey. The B-1 bomber fits this role well. It can carry a large number of these missiles in a single sortie, which explains the scale of destruction seen in recent footage. Multiple targets struck almost simultaneously, without a single aircraft crossing into heavily defended territory. Alongside it, the F-35 plays a different but connected role. Its sensors build a detailed picture of the battlefield in real time, tracking air defense systems and feeding that information to other aircraft, even when carrying external fuel tanks, which reduce its stealth advantage. The F-35 continues operating in contested airspace, clearing a path and supplying targeting data for other strikes to follow. Together, these two aircraft represent a layered system. One aircraft sees the battlefield. Another strikes it from a distance. Neither has to take the greatest risk alone. This explains why the list of targets has grown steadily over the past several days rather than all at once. Coastal radar stations were hit first, then the islands of Iran, once described as unsinkable defensive positions in the Gulf, then sensor and surveillance networks along the coast. Only after that did the campaign reach command centers deep inside Tehran. This is not random escalation. It is a sequence. Each phase removes a layer of Iran's ability to see, respond to, or defend against what comes next. By the time command centers became the target, much of the surrounding defensive and surveillance network had already been degraded. There is also a reserve capability that has not yet been used. Larger bunker buster weapons associated with aircraft like the B-, to remain available for deeper, more fortified targets. What this shows is a campaign built in stages, each one preparing the ground for the next. The strikes on command centers were not an isolated escalation. They were the point the entire sequence had been building toward from the very first night. With Iran's command centers damaged and its air defenses stretched thin, the real question is no longer about the strikes themselves. It is about what happens when an army loses the ability to coordinate. A military does not function only through weapons and soldiers. It functions through communication. Someone has to decide where a missile goes, who fires it, when to hold back. When command centers are destroyed, that chain does not disappear completely, but it becomes slower, weaker, and harder to trust. Orders may not reach the right people in time. Some units may act without clear direction at all. This creates a real risk of uncoordinated action. Iran does not fight alone. It supports a network of allied groups across the region, forces that often rely on direction from Tehran to decide when and where to strike. If that direction becomes unreliable, these groups may begin acting on their own judgment, without oversight from the central government. That kind of unplanned escalation is far harder to predict and far harder to stop than a strike ordered from the top. At the same time, Iran's dual strategy, threatening war while quietly signaling openness to negotiation, becomes much harder to manage. Balancing military pressure with diplomatic outreach requires precise control. It requires knowing exactly how far to push before pulling back. That kind of control depends on functioning command centers, the very infrastructure now under direct attack. The effects are already spreading beyond Iran's borders. In Iraq, every crude oil loading terminal was shut down after a drone struck a tanker at a major export terminal, a facility responsible for a large share of Iraq's daily oil exports. No group has claimed responsibility for that attack, but the timing lines up closely with the broader disruption across the region. Add to this the blockade near Iran's own primary oil export island and a slowdown in traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, and a clear picture starts to form. Regional oil flow is being affected on multiple fronts at once. For decision makers watching this conflict, the pattern over the last 8 days tells its own story. Strikes began on the coastline. They moved to islands, then to surveillance networks, then finally to the heart of Iran's command structure. Each stage built on the one before it. Each stage removed another layer of Iran's ability to respond in an organized way. The open question now is what a regime does when it can still fight but can no longer fully control how that fight unfolds. History suggests that period. The gap between having weapons and having the coordination to use them wisely is often when conflicts become the most unpredictable. Whether this leads to a broader regional war, a fractured and uneven Iranian response, or eventually a return to the negotiating table, may depend less on how many weapons Iran has left and more on whether it can still communicate to use them at all.